My story begins on a chilly fall day in 2007. My mom picked me up after school after my cross-country practice. I could immediately tell that something was wrong. I remember she said the words, "I went to the doctor and I'm sick." Me, being 15 years old, thought she meant she had a cold or something. But then she said, "I'm really sick. I have cancer and it's not good." My whole world changed that day in the parking lot of Parkview High School. It turned out that my mom had been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. She was 40 years old. After that day, life was a whirlwind and became a complicated series of hard decisions made by a teenager dealing with guilt and so many other losses as a result of my mom's death. I remembered that I hoped the doctors were wrong, that somehow she would survive this. But my mom would gently assure me that this was terminal. My mom fought hard. She had 3 children she wanted to be there for, and she was buying as much time as possible through chemo, radiation, and surgery. When my mom first got sick, I confided in my high school counselor, Connie Peterson, who is here tonight. Connie checked in on me regularly during my mom's illness and let all of my teachers know about my situation so that I didn't have to be the one to tell them. She knew my complicated family dynamics and the other responsibilities I was trying to juggle. Miss Peterson was the first person to tell me about Lost and Found. She told me that she volunteered at a grief center and that when my mom died, I should go, that I would lead it. She was right. In summer of 2008, my mom took us on a vacation to Florida. We went to Disney World and the beach. She wanted us to have one last trip together to make memories with her. By winter of 2008, her health was declining rapidly. She always loved Christmas, and she was praying she could spend one last one with us. I remember she did some extra rounds of radiation that the doctors didn't recommend, just to try to make it through the holidays. By some miracle, she made it through Christmas. We knew our time was limited, but we weren't sure when it would happen. In the spring of 2009, her health continued to decline, so my brother Colton and I moved in with our dad, and my grandma moved in with my mom to take care of her and my 5-year-old little brother Carlos. I had promised my mom I would come and see her over my spring break. However, as a 17-year-old, I picked up as many extra shifts as I could at work to make some extra money. I clocked out on Sunday evening, and I realized the entire week had passed, and I never saw my mom. I felt horrible. I immediately called my mom and told her I was on my way. She asked if I would pick her up a strawberry shake. She was barely eating, and so I was so excited that I could bring her something she was craving. I got to her house, shake in hand, and I spent hours with my mom. She drank the entire shake, and we talked. Well, I cried, and she talked. She was calm. She was at peace. As I was crying, telling her I wasn't ready to not have my mom anymore, she told me it was all right. She told me not to cry, that she wasn't scared, that everything would be okay. Looking back, even through all of the guilt I have of being a teenager with a dying mom, torn between wanting independence and being with my friends, but knowing that the time with my mom was limited, I am so thankful I had this night. March 29th, 2009. It was the last night I ever talked to my mom. That night, my mom slipped into a coma. On Tuesday, an ambulance took her to a nursing home facility. I held my 5-year-old little brother in the other room so he wouldn't see the EMTs putting her on a gurney. She was given a room in the back, the ones they give to patients that aren't going to be there long. So I would walk the halls past 80 and 90-year-olds to see my mom, who had just turned 42 the month before. That Friday night, I had a school dance I was supposed to go to, but I got a gut feeling that I should be with my mom, so that's where I went. I was there all evening with my aunt. We would tell stories and talk to my mom, hoping she could hear us. even though we had no evidence that she did. Around midnight, a nurse told us that it was time, and we needed to call in any family that wanted to say goodbye. My aunt called the family while I held my mom's hand. I stepped out and called Miss Peterson, who came to be with me. We all gathered around my mom's bed. Her breaths were slow and barely visible. I kept my eyes glued on her chest. They had taken her off the machines, so there would be no sound when she died. I kept watching, and just when I would think she was gone, another breath would come. Eventually, no more came. I remember saying, "I think she's gone," in a voice that didn't sound like my own. My mom had died with my 5-year-old brother asleep in the chair next to her. My legs gave out and I collapsed to the floor. When I woke up the next morning, for a split second, I thought it had all been a terrible dream. But then I realized my mom was actually dead. My actual heart hurt. I went that day and picked out what she would be buried in. I was only 17. On my first day back at school, no one would talk to me. Not students or teachers. It was extremely uncomfortable. My first class of the day, I sat on the front row, and while no one would talk to me, I could hear them talking about me and about how my mom had died. I felt so alone. My friends were as supportive as they could be, but I still felt isolated. I know people were afraid to upset me, so they just didn't talk to me. It felt like I had a disease they were afraid of catching. I did. It's called grief. Grief is oftentimes complicated, and mine was no different. I was grieving the death of my mom, but I was also grieving the loss of my brother. That little 5-year-old boy was sent to live with family near Kansas City because his dad wasn't in the picture. I begged to be able to keep him with me, but I wasn't 18 yet. My aunt and uncle promised to bring him to visit every other weekend. That promise was not kept. I was not in a good place. I needed help. It was time to go to Lost and Found. I still remember everything about my first time at Lost and Found. I walked into the Connor house, and it felt so safe and homey. I met with Dr. Karen Scott, and she told me that Lost and Found was going to help me. She said that right now, everything was reminding me of my mom and her death, but that through Lost and Found, they would help me work through my grief, and eventually I would learn how to live with it. That grief wouldn't take up all of the space. Group started right after this meeting. The power of group is incredible. I immediately felt like I belonged. Every other person in group knew exactly what I was feeling without me even having to open my mouth. We could talk about the hard things. We could talk about the guilt we carried or the insensitive comments that people made to us, how alone we felt in the outside world, or how our families had changed when we lost more than just our loved ones who had died. We would talk about how strange it felt that the world kept going while our entire worlds were falling apart. We were given tools to work through our grief and to start to feel okay again. This isn't something to get over, rather something to learn how to live with. Lost and Found taught me how to laugh again without feeling guilty. They taught me how to make it through a holiday without my mom. They showed me ways to honor her and remember her. The friendships I developed because of the shared understanding still endure. I'm still in contact with many of the people from my group, many of who are here tonight. As you can imagine, sharing such deep feelings leads to some pretty strong bonds. I closed in group in May of 2010 and began volunteering 3 months later. I volunteered in group for 10 years and then took a 2-year break after I had my first child. Then I joined the junior board and I'm currently the secretary on it. Another chapter in my story is that after several years of trying, I was able to get my little brother back. When he was 14, he came to live with me and my husband. That little 5-year-old boy is now a 21-year-old man in the audience here tonight. Carlos is a student at Missouri State, and he too is involved with Lost and Found. He's on the junior board and on the Run and Remember committee. We as a community are extremely lucky to have this resource right here in our backyard. Lost and Found can help every single person in the family, regardless of age. I still tell people to this day that I don't know where I'd be without Lost and Found. I owe so much to them. Thank you, Dr. Karen Scott and Sean Askinosie, for creating this incredible organization. Thank you, Ms. Peterson, for always being there for me. I hope you all will be the Miss Peterson to your friends and coworkers when they experience grief and need pointed in the direction of Lost and Found. Thank you, Jamie Fields, for volunteering alongside me and for the meaningful work you still do day in and day out. Thank you to all of the staff and volunteers who pour your heart and soul into the mission. Thank you to all of you and the many donors who make this all possible, who allow children, teens, and adults access to free grief support so they don't have to walk their grief journey alone, because Lost and Found is with them every step of the way. Thank you for being there for grieving families. Thank you.